trainings, and workshops on educational action research, research methods, and research publication. His research interests includes science education, teacher professional development, and qualitative methods in research. Friends, ladies, and gentlemen, I introduce to you our esteemed speaker, Professor Jovito Anito Jr.
Good morning. Thank you, Steve. Good morning,
Morning
everyone.
po.
Thank you, Doc Rossi, for this invitation and opportunity to be back to PNU virtually. Uh, I taught in PNU for like 8 months. I was with Rossi and the rest of the gang there in PNU for a very short time. Um, and I'm happy that I could connect with a PNU again through this lecture workshop. Okay, so I hope that we will be able to learn qualitative research today and the process of making sense with qualitative data. I understand that you are all into didactics and in the field of mathematics. So I guess it would be a challenge for me to deliver qualitative research to mathematics teachers. My understanding and my basic assumption is um, we embrace the quantitative methods or quantitative design of research being into the field of mathematics. But I think you are open enough to listen and learn the other paradigm of research. We normally learn quantitative research, and in most cases, in many universities, quantitative research is presented as the only or seemingly as the only available research design, and then the rest is not at all research. I hope that this time will at least change that perspective. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about qualitative research in general, and later we'll have a presentation or a demo on the use of a certain software in coding qualitative data. And I guess that's really your intention because you have with you today your qualitative data already. I'll be presenting a software and even Excel. If we still have time, I can also present it um, the basic way of treating data using Excel. Um, I don't know. I maybe some of you qualitative research is new, or maybe some have already experienced conducting research or qualitative research. Anyone who experienced doing a qualitative research or lahat quanti? Anyway, sige, I will not ask for your reply anymore. I'm going to talk about qualitative data analysis, but I'd like to begin with some of the important um, principles in qualitative data analysis that will be helpful later when, or qualitative research that will be helpful later when you um, process your qualitative data. May I confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So,
Yes po, sir.
all right. Okay. So, um,
Yes, sir.
this is going to be a very informal discussion, conversation with you. Feel free to butt in anytime if you have questions. We're very few. So, um, talking anytime during my presentation would be manageable. So, feel free to ask questions during my presentation. Just especially when there are items or concepts or principles that you think disagree with um, what you believe or what you hold true in the moment. So feel free to raise it. Let's discuss. Let's talk about it. Okay. All right. So qualitative research is, for me, captured in this very profound statement of T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from exploration. At the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. That describes fully what qualitative research is. Sometimes there are things that surround us that we take for granted, but if you look at them closely, to get a different perspective from those things, try to explore, try to investigate, and try to see those things from a different lens, then we realize we are seeing a different object already. And that's qualitative research. We look at our experiences, we look at our practices from a different perspective, and on- in the end, you will realize that there's something that you didn't know about that thing or about what you're doing. Even if we're talking about the mundane things that you do or experience, there's always something to learn from those when you just open your eyes and explore those things. So basically, qualitative research is about exploring the mundane, exploring what you can observe, what you can experience, and making sense of your experiences, making sense of your practices. And I guess this links to your didactics. We're trying to see how we can scientifically explore your practices in teaching mathematics. We can see how we can explore how we can scientifically examine your practices in the teaching of mathematics using research. Okay, so uh, as a as a as a kickoff to learning about qualitative research, I would like you to imagine this as your epistemological framework when you do qualitative research. We know that qualitative research is the counterpart of quantitative research. If you position quali and quanti in a continuum, you can see that quali rests on the other side of the continuum while quanti is on the other side. So basically, it's about two things that, by nature of their epistemology and ontology, won't agree and won't meet because they lie on different ends of a continuum. So that's where you position qualitative research from the usual perspective of research. Okay, so when you are there in that qualitative end of the continuum, you are being confronted and you are being conscious of the different forces that shape you as a person. So when you are a qualitative researcher, it is not just about you being a researcher, it is you being a person. So it entails a lot of self-awareness, self-examination, and self-reflection regarding who you are and your position with regard to the different dimensions or the different forces around you. So what are these forces? In qualitative research, you have to have a clear definition of yourself. You have to have a clear awareness of who you are relative to the following. Um, Imagine how you respond to your family members, to the principles and practices of your family, and that defines you as a person. And that defines you as well as a researcher. That defines you as an academic. You are being confronted by the policies of the government, the laws, the principles of the church, the dogma of the church, the tradition, history, culture, principles in the academe, economic situation, and ethics. These are some of the many forces that shape you as a person. And the lessons you learn from this are the same lessons that you will use in researching as a qualitative research. Okay, because when you do qualitative research, there is the self that manifests in the process. So in qualitative research, unlike the quanti, which is highly objective, qualitative research is a highly subjective form of research. It means that the self manifests in the research process, the self manifests in the research output or in the research report. This means that you have to have a clear picture of yourself before you locate yourself in your research. I hope that's clear. When we do qualitative research, the first thing we need to do is to have a self examination, to look at our own ontology, to look at our own epistemology, look at our own ethics, who we are, how we respond to people, how we respond to our teachers, how we respond to the issues of politics, how we respond to the issues in government, because these things are needed in processing qualitative data. In processing qualitative data, you do not rely solely on the words or the data given to you by the participants, because qualitative research is a subjective form of research. It means that yourself, your understanding of the world, your worldview will manifest in the process of analyzing the data and in reporting your research. It is important then that you know how and what shapes you as a person or as a human being. I hope that's clear. I'd like to share, okay, qualitative research or etymologically comes from qualitas, which means quality, features, or entities. This looks at the kind of things. Maybe you can look at the material and the symbolic uh, features of things or people. And these symbolic and material features of things or people uh, or have something that people could make sense with, okay, and could make a picture of, or could make a theory of, or could make a general understanding of. Okay, so these qualities of things will confront uh, people in their daily activities or in everyday phenomena. Okay, so qualitative research then talks about the qualitative and the qualitative features of the elements of daily interaction. So when you position this, or when you apply this in the science of teaching mathematics, qualitative research is about understanding your practices of teaching mathematics in the lens of every or all forces that surround you. It means that when you study your practice of teaching mathematics using qualitative research, it's not just about what objectively is being shown by the tests of the students. When you study qualitatively your practices in the teaching of mathematics, you will look at the different forces that surround your practice in order to have a deep understanding of your practice. So, what do I mean by that? So, look at your relationship with your fellow teachers. Look at your relationship with the students. Look at the economic aspect of the society or the community where you are teaching. Look at the culture of the school. Look at the policies of DepEd, policies of SHED with regard to teaching or education. Look at your relationship in the family. How does it influence your teaching of mathematics? These things have bearing on understanding your practices of teaching mathematics. And we do that qualitatively because qualitative research is limitless. It's open, it's emergent. It means that anything that comes is data. Anything that comes has something to say about your practice. So anything that you perceive can be processed, can be analyzed, and and can be related to your practices as mathematics teachers. Okay, so it's opposite to quantitas because we always count numbers. Sometimes quality, sometimes features cannot be counted or cannot be quantified. It's easy to quantify grades of your students because you have the quantitative way of measuring them. But sometimes it's difficult to quantify your relationship with your uh, boss or your supervisor. It's difficult to quantify your relationship with your students. And this is where qualitative research comes in. It's all about making sense with things that cannot be quantified, making sense with data that cannot be represented by numbers. Again, feel free to butt in if there are questions or there are clarifications. I'd like to share my evolution as a researcher. I deem it also important to show this to you so that you can understand where I'm coming from with my words, with my language in this presentation. In my master's thesis, I started with a classical grounded theory. I thought it's everything about qualitative research. I thought it's the ultimate design of qualitative research. And then later I realized that that grounded theory doesn't want also to be recognized as a or in any of the two primary designs of research. They say that they are not quali, they say that they are not quanti. Although many books will classify grounded theory as qualitative research because they believe that there another design that is sufficient on its own. It has the complete ontological and epistemological framing or grounding that they believe it can sustain or it can be considered as a standalone research design. And then I started doing some statistical analysis because of a project I was engaged with in before. It required us to process data quantitatively. So I was compelled to learn statistics. And in LaSalle, I thought, uh, ironically, qualitative researcher me, I was teaching statistics in science education research in the LaSalle University to some master students. And then that's because I started learning quantitative research and I realized that it's not just about, or there's no such thing as a perfect design. I thought it was everything at the start, but I realized that there are things also that the qualitative research cannot explain. And there are things that are better explained by the quantitative techniques. So I started to embrace quantitative research. I started to become engaged in projects that require some heavy statistical analysis also, like even development and validation of instruments that require some statistical analysis or more sophisticated softwares in the analysis. So that was it. So I started to mix now quali and quanti research, and then I was involved in the action research conferences in De La Salle University. We actually started with Dr. Prudente, the annual Action Research Action Learning Congress in De La Salle University. I don't know if you know that. There's an annual conference on action research in De La Salle University. So we started that, and I started to be exposed to some participatory practices in in research, and this is where I started to develop this some form of pragmatic and transformative perspective of research. Uh, Before I was very conscious about the methods of research. Now I'm more interested on what's there out after the research rather than focusing on the method, because we realize that methods can be divergent, especially in qualitative research, or methods can be violated. Methods can be changed. These are arbitrary guidelines in doing research, and I thought before that's really it. Because that's what we are teach. That's what we are taught in college. Like they provide us with template. Okay, so that we it's simply telling us that if you do not follow the template, you are wrong. So that was my perspective also. And then I realized, oh, it's not like that. Research design, research methods or procedures are arbitrary things. We cannot treat them as an absolute, as absolute. There's always some ways of diverging from the convention, and that links me back to my grounded theory perspective, because grounded theory uh, is highly emergent. It allows things to emerge and to process according to what is emerging. So that's my evolution as a researcher. Okay, so that explains my language, and that explains my orientation. The goal of your research must be to direct your methods, not the other way around. So when you do research in qualitative uh, paradigm, you are more concerned about your uh, purpose of research or the goal of your research must be the ultimate guide of your research, not your methods. Sometimes we align with the methodical expertise or competence rather than what is necessary to study or investigate. In the practice of teaching mathematics, I hope that we always remember that it's always the goal of your research that will guide us, not the other way, not the methods. Okay, so what's the implication of that? Sometimes people will research based or according to what they know or what method they know. For example, I cannot do an interview research because I do not know how to process qualitatively. So it's not like that. So if your intention really is to understand the phenomenon and the only thing to do that is to do an interview, then engage in that study and look for help or study how to analyze the interview data. Okay, so that you will produce something that is helpful or that will be useful. Okay. Right now, my orientation is on the mixed. It's about understanding the world, understanding every phenomenon using different approaches or different methods of investigation. Okay, so I'd like to talk about some of the oppressive knowledges in the academe right now. Okay, I'm not saying that after this you will talk to your professors and tell them that you are very oppressive, sir. Okay, some of the oppressive knowledges. What are these oppressive knowledges? These are knowledges that are being handed down to us. It's as if we cannot do anything about that knowledge. And it's as if it's the absolute knowledge that has to be followed or that has to be subscribed to. And there's so full of that in the academe. Your professor, your advisor will tell you, you do this, you do that. If you don't do this, I will fail you. You do this, you do that because if you don't do this, it doesn't follow the standard. In the first place, standards are oppressive knowledges. Why? Because it represses us, or it prohibits us from being creative, from being explorative. Okay, so these are some of the sources of oppressive knowledges in the family relationships. Okay, so maybe your mother will tell you, you trust me all the time or you follow me all the time because I'm your mother. These are some of the oppressive knowledges. And I'd like you to be conscious about these oppressive knowledges because when you deal with qualitative data, we do not want these oppressive knowledges, or we don't want researchers to impose their oppressive knowledges or their understanding of things on the ideas of others. Okay, so uh, while it is considered subjective, we have to be careful not to impose our understanding or our worldview on the data at hand. Okay, so I'd like you to be conscious of some of these knowledges. So there are knowledge practices of yourself that may be oppressive in the lens of others. So it could be oppressive if you impose that to them. You tell them that you have to do this because this is what is right. In qualitative research, we refrain from doing that because we are allergic to what is right. Because everything is emerging, everything is subjective. Your what is right for you may not be what is right for from our lens. So remember the different forces. So that is right for you because that is what those different forces around you taught you. We are taught differently in our context. So what will happen now? Do we really need to fight because we don't agree with these things? So in processing qualitative data or in looking at your data later, I want you to be conscious about your understanding, your perception, your knowledge. You ask yourself, am I imposing this to the data? Is this really what the data is telling me? Later, I'll talk about reflexivity as a way of as a way of going away from as a strategy of going away from this. Uh, in qualitative data analysis, as I've said, we manifest as a thinking being, and as a thinking being, we we avoid being too we avoid being forcive with our with our own paradigm. We cannot tell the participant that it is not like that. This is what it's meant. It means by this. So you are wrong. So we don't do that in qualitative research. All right. So I'd like to summarize your epistemology as a qualitative researcher in this three important principles in qualitative research. In qualitative research, everybody embraces subjectivity. So, your questions about the objectiveness of research will not have place in qualitative research because objectivity applies only to quantitative research. In qualitative research, we embrace, we recognize, and we acknowledge that we are all different from each other. We acknowledge that Mom Rosie is different from you. So if you think that Mom Rosie has a different or Doc Rosie has a different perspective than you or worldview than you, then that's normal because we are all different. That's the thing that you need to carry with you when you process a qualitative data or a verbal data. You always remember that the source of that data is different from you. It means that this source of data has a different cultural, social, political orientation than you. You may belong to the same country. You may be coming from the same university, but apparently you are different. So you have to embrace that. You have to acknowledge that there are differences between your understanding of things, between your worldview, than the others or than the sources of data. You confront biases also in qualitative research because you can acknowledge subjectivity, because you embrace subjectivity. It is not proper to stop there. So sinabi na, oh, yun, kasi yan yung idea mo, bala ka. Ako, iba ang iniisip ko eh. So, bala ka. So, hindi ganon. We confront biases. How do we confront biases? We talk. We don't intend to eliminate bias to be more neutral. It's not necessary to be neutral. It's not necessary to agree. In qualitative research, it is not necessary to agree. It is necessary to confront bias, to talk, and to manifest the differences in our perspectives. So, how do we do that? When you encounter uh, a phrase or a statement from the source of data that is contradicting to your own understanding or to your own processes, probe further or confront the differences. You can talk to the source of data. You can clarify further. What do you mean by this? I have a different understanding of this. This is how I understand that. This is how I see that. Why is it that you are saying that this one? So can you enlighten me with that? Or can you talk more about that? I need to understand your perspective. So that's how you confront biases. So in the end, you don't have to agree in your report, when you write about your analysis, you simply tell that you raised your objection to her perspective or to her understanding. It's enough to tell in your report that you do not agree. That's qualitative research. You do not have to sugarcoat it in your report that she is wrong or you are wrong. You cannot you cannot tell that I subscribe to her idea in the end. So it's not like that. It's about being responsible about your knowledge. And being responsible about your knowledge is to critically position your knowledge against the knowledge of others. And in the end, come up with a uh, with a resolution. And the resolution doesn't always mean agreement. You don't have to agree. You just need to confront your biases. And then negotiate meanings in the process of confronting biases. You tell the participant or the source of data, isn't it like this? If the participant doesn't agree, then there's nothing wrong with the process. There's nothing wrong with that. Because again, the participant knows also that this is how I experience it. Maybe that's how you experience it there in Luzon, but here in Zamboanga del Norte, it's different. So these are the things that you have to be conscious about in processing your data. We cannot be the same all throughout. We cannot be the same across all parts of the world. Okay, so we acknowledge that. Question so far? Do I still make sense? Anyone? Let's let's pause for a while, and I'd like to invite you to uh, I'd like to invite you to give some initial um, comment or any question or clarification. Should I call names? Maybe I can call Ma'am Lovelyn. Oral recitation na to.
Yes. Yes, sir. Good morning po.
Good morning, Ma'am Lovelyn. Thing you would like, any insight you want to add or you want to raise or anything?
All right, sir. Well, so far, like you have mentioned, as mathematics major, it's really hard. Ako na lang po for myself to really conduct qualitative researches, and with the statements that you have mentioned, especially parang medyo na ano po talaga ako dun sa sinabi niyo na it's more like subjective
Mhm.
rather than objective. And the last thing is that yung pong it's not necessary to agree, it is necessary to confront biases. I think po kasi since sige ako na lang po talaga. Yung
Okay.
para po kasi sa
Ikaw
akin
na.
as mathematics major, sir, parang
Yes.
since we parang sanay po talaga na objective.
That's
So like for
right.
example, na
Right.
halimbawa lang po in a simple parang teaching na sinolve ko to, ito lang ang sagot. Yung parang
Yeah.
ganun po. So I think pagka nagko-quali ka, so kagaya nga po nun, para po kasi para sa akin na sinasabi niyo po na pwedeng ito nga yung aking opinion,
Mm-mm.
na po sasabihin ng ibang researcher, for example, this one. So parang ako, parang it's, the intention really is to parang ipaunawa, parang to i-prove na tama ako, parang ganun.
Mm-mm.
Which is, yun nga po yung ano sa quality na depende rin po kasi nga kung yung roots natin, kung ay mga bagay na pinaniniwalaan. Just like how you start the presentation with you,
Mm-mm.
the term you.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
And siguro yun po talaga yung mahirap for us, mathematics major, na kaya hindi po madalas na nagka-quali.
Mm-mm.
Yun lang po, sir.
Okay, thank you. From Cherry Ann, any thing you can share? Any significant realization or learning so far? Or questions? Nag-CR si Ma'am Cherry Ann. May utang ka, Ma'am Cherry
Sir.
Ann. Yes, Dave. Go ahead, Dave.
Good morning po. Narinig po ako.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay po. Good morning po sa lahat. Siguro po ang narinig ko po talaga dun sa inyo pong talk so far na naka-strike sa akin is the one that you said about yung pagiging oppressive po ng ng standards natin sa research siguro sa graduates. So, parang napaisip nga po ako na oo nga no, that we really have to follow the standards set by the university, otherwise pwedeng hindi tayo makagraduate or or matagalan tayo. Pero syempre po sa case po ng for example ay yung teaching po research sa senior high school, since senior high school students ito po ay kumbaga bago lang sa kanila ang research, kumbaga guidance po ang ating mapoprovide kasi dahil baguhan nga po sila sa research. Hindi ko pa alam kung na-oppress din po ba yung mga senior high school students natin kapag ginaguide natin sila, kapag sinasabihan ba natin sila na hindi pwede yan, hindi pwede to, it doesn't follow the standards whatsoever. So, yun lang po. So, medyo napaisip po ako dun sa sinabi niyo na yan at kumbaga hanggang ngayon iniisip ko po yun at nag-reflect po ako, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, it becomes oppressive if you fail a student for not following the standard and not listening to the student or not giving the student the opportunity to explain and to cite his orientation. For example, he did it differently than you expected or you instructed. Then you failed the student right away without us telling or giving the student the chance to explain. Maybe she or he has valid valid in terms of epistemology, valid in terms of ontology, he's right. And then dismiss that right away as wrong because of the standard that you follow. That becomes oppressive. But I'm not saying that oppressive knowledges are wrong all the time. It becomes wrong as we apply it. Some oppressive knowledges are actually gaining positive effect on our or order, in fact, in some institutions. Like it could serve as as a guide among many students in their thesis or dissertation, but it becomes oppressive if you fail them from the very reason that they did not follow the template or did not follow the, the so-called standard. Anyway, so I hope that like Dave, we can start reflecting about the things around us, our processes, the processes that are imposed on us, our responses to these processes. Okay, so may I proceed? Okay, so I left with these notes on the epistemological perspectives of qualitative research. We embrace subjectivity, we confront biases, and in the process of confronting biases, we negotiate meanings. Again, knowledge is relative and it is socially constructed. It means that because you have a different society, you have a different social background, you may not be at all times, uh, no, you may not agree with others at all times. Okay. Sorry for the dog. Okay. As I've said, I can talk about reflexivity. I don't know if you heard this term before, but reflexivity is a very important term in qualitative research. Every qualitative research has to dedicate a paragraph or a section that talks about reflexivity. It's basically locating yourself in the analysis or locating the analysis vis-a-vis your perspective or your orientation. So, in reflexivity, to prepare you for that, again, I go back to the illustration of the you being confronted with so many forces. So, this is your position with regard to the data at hand. So, when you talk about your practices as math teacher, then you locate yourself. Why do I say that it is wrong? Who told me that it's wrong? To whose standards do I say it's wrong? Okay, so these are all important to define before you process, before you start understanding the world around you, before you start exploring the world around you. Try to ask yourself, to whose standards do I subscribe to? When I say the government is wrong, who told me that it's wrong? Whose standards do I say it's wrong? If you say that there's something wrong with the way we are taught in the university, then to whose standards do you subscribe to and say that these practices of the university are wrong? Okay, so in the same lens, you can understand your context in the teaching of mathematics by understanding yourself. Where do I come from? What's my orientation? Who shaped me? Who influenced me? Who influenced my influencer? Where do I trace my epistemological point of view? Where do I trace my philosophy, my theoretical perspective? Okay. So some of the things about yourself may need to be defined. For example, who you are in terms of your age. Age matters in qualitative data analysis. As you grow older, you have a different perspective of the world. As you grow older, you have a more refined, presumably, a more refined understanding of things. So you have a more polished picture of the world, a more polished picture of different things. So as you grow older, you may have a lesser issues of biases or lesser issues of differences because you can become more embracing of the subjectivity. Okay, your gender. Males may have a different picture of the world than females. I'm not saying it is, it happens, or it really is, but there it could be gender may have a different females may have a different things. Why? Because females have different orientations. They have even different physiological needs and physiological faculty, right? So they may have different pictures. For example, something that you laugh at may not be funny at all to a woman, because you have differences. So this difference pa lang will affect the way you process your data. Maybe you laugh at the scenario and they're talking to a woman and the woman doesn't see it as funny. So there's something wrong. There's a conflict between how you react and the reaction of the source of the information. Race, ethnic group, affiliation, even sexual orientation. Okay, your personal experiences, what you believe, your own biases, your own preferences. If you prefer sports, you may have a different perspective than those who prefer academics, right? Your political and ideological stances, your political point of view, your support to the university, to the president of the Philippines, or your support to the former president, for example. Your political orientation, it has some bearing on the way you process data. Okay, so if uh, if you trust the president so much, then perhaps during interview, pag nagmumura yung source of information, then that's normal to you. That's acceptable. For us in Mindanao, we generally the president being cursive and behaving that way, we see it as acceptable because that's we also see that among others in Mindanao. But for the people in Luzon, they see it as offensive. All the time they attack the president because it's offensive. Yeah, it's offensive from your point of view. But from the point of view of the people in Mindanao, it may be acceptable. There's conflict there if you do not know how to embrace the subjectivity, and if you do not know how to process the biases. Maybe it's acceptable. Okay, so to whose standards do we say that it's offensive? Something like that. Okay, but I'm not saying that any camp is wrong. We're just saying that any camp is entitled to his own idea, his own belief, his own orientation, his own practices. Your cultural orientation, your historical structure, power and structure, for example. Who is influencing you? Okay, so who is giving instructions? Who is giving you instructions? The Are you following CHED? Are you following DepEd? So is DepEd or are DepEd advisories or are DepEd memos fair? Yes, so things like that. Okay. Now let's look into the process of qualitative data analysis. So it's already 9 o'clock. Okay, so we can start looking at processing the data. I like to start by telling you that I can never teach conceptualization. The only thing I can teach is the process of coding because coding is different from conceptualization. Conceptualization is done through coding, and coding is highly dependent on the process of conceptualization. The process of conceptualization relies heavily on yourself. It means that I can never process the data the way you would do it. I can only teach you the basic principles of conceptualization and some techniques we can use using a software, but I can never teach you how to conceptualize. In the first place, conceptualization relies on the objective of your research or the objective of your investigation. If you have a different objective, if your investigation is different than my orientation, then definitely I cannot give justice to the original purpose of your research if I am going to analyze the data for you. Do you follow? It means that the best person to conceptualize or to analyze qualitative data is the researcher himself or the researcher herself. We can use a software, but the software will never analyze the data for you like the SPSS. The only thing that the software can do is to help you organize your concepts and the relationship of your concepts. It will never tell you what the data means because computers are limited. The computers can never substitute fully your perspective, your worldview, your paradigm. So in qualitative research, there is no such thing as a 100% computer-based analysis. We are using some computers or some softwares to aid in organizing our data, but we can never rely on softwares to study the data for us. The only thing that the software can do perhaps is to do some semantics and some hermeneutics, but in terms of the deep meaning and the relationship of meanings, it's only the researcher who can do that. Okay, so later when we do when you do the analysis of your data, I want you to feel empowered. When I say empowered, always believe that you are the best person who can say something about your data. Why do I say that? You're the best person to say something about your data because you are the ones who conceptualize the research. How do we conceptualize the research? We conceptualize the research based on our own research interest, our discipline, our niche, for example, our orientation, our philosophy, our theories of practice. So this shape our research. So it means that when we do research, it is something that is very close to us. It means that you are the best person to talk about the data for that research, and you're the best person to analyze the data of your research. In qualitative research, we don't allow even the teacher, even the advisor, even the panelist to speak about the data and say that you are wrong about your analysis of the data because your advisor is not you who conceptualized the research, is not you who gathered the data, is not you who saw the facial expressions, the gestures of the interviewee during the process of interview. It was you who did all those, right? So it is ridiculous that the advisor or the panelist can represent you in terms of analyzing the data. They may be good in process, they may be good methodically, but conceptually, they are not in the best position to analyze the data. So I want you to feel empowered when you analyze qualitative data because it's your research. Okay, let's start with the usual QDA process. So when you analyze data, you get to know your data. This can be facilitated if the researcher is the ones gathering the data. So in qualitative research, to compensate the empowering nature of data analysis in quali, it is also important, it is also necessary that the researcher himself will gather the data, will conduct the interview, and in fact, it is highly recommended that the researcher will be the one to transcribe the data. If you have a transcriber, the better. It has to be the researcher. Why? Because analysis of qualitative data is not an independent process. It's not a standalone process. You cannot say that after this, I'm going to analyze the data. Analysis of data in qualitative research happens the moment you start drafting your questions. Why? Because your next question and the probing questions that you place there are dependent of your analysis. So when you start drafting your questionnaire, you imagine the participants answering your question. And then you imagine their answers. And then you imagine your response to the answers. And you imagine how you probe further to get more answers. That's the reason why concept analysis happens from the as early as you start thinking of the questions in your research. There is analysis that happens during interview process or during data collection. When you talk to the sources of information, there's analysis going on. Why? Because your next question is highly dependent on the answers to the previous question. There's analysis because you have to make sure that your succeeding question aligns with the responses and the purpose of the original question or the first question. There's analysis that is going on. In in transcribing data, there's analysis that's going on. There's preliminary examination of data. Meaning to say, as you transcribe, as you encode the data, there are things, concepts, pictures that come to your mind. This could include the facial expression of the participant during interview. This could include the gestures of the participants, so you can recall exactly how the participant behaved during data collection. Okay, so there's already conceptualization, there's already analysis of data there. All right, so if you fail to do that, for example, if you ask somebody to gather the data for you, then the best thing to do before you do the formal analysis, we call that the formal analysis, is to read and reread the data. Read and reread the text and ask the one who who transcribed, or the one who conducted the interview for clarifications. There are things that you want to ask. For example, how did he say this? What was the context when this was mentioned? What did you say prior to this? It's not captured in the text or in the transcript. What were you talking about, so that you can understand further? So if there is no answer to that, then you can put that as part of the things to explore later. It's about getting the initial impression of your data. The second step is about focusing the analysis. When you focus the analysis, you go back to the purpose of your research. Why did you do the research in the first place, or why did you do the data collection in the first place? Okay. When you focus the analysis, you go back to the objective of your research. What's the implication of that in processing data? When you have the focus of your research or the focus of the analysis, you become selective of the information. While we say that qualitative research is emergent or emerging or is highly emergent, it is not also a good practice in qualitative research to welcome every information that you get. In the first place, you have your purpose of research. It has to go back to the purpose of your research. When you say go back to the purpose of your research, be selective. If these things have nothing to do at all in my analysis or in my purpose of research, then I have to put this as a miscellaneous code, or I can dismiss that as unnecessary. Okay, so for example, if the participant talks a lot about his relationship with her boss or his boss or his supervisor, and you're talking about something else, then that may not be necessary unless you can find the conceptual link between what you intend to find out and what he is sharing to you. You have to dismiss those. You have to be selective also. Otherwise, you will never finish your research. You will never finish your analysis. You can have a focus by question, by case, by time, or event. So you can look at the units of analysis either by individual, so, based on the sources of data or group, however you want to do it. Then you start categorizing information. This is the key or the core of the process. I'm talking of the general topic here, a general practice here. You categorize information. How do we categorize information? You identify commonality, you identify a pattern, you organize them into a coherent set of categories, or you assign a name to best represent those uh, ideas that you group together. I'm going to discuss this in detail later. Look for patterns and connections within and between categories, and make some interpretation or bringing it all together. This is not a linear process. It means that you can get to know your data, you can start categorizing information. You can go back to the focus of the analysis, you can have interpretation, you can have identifying patterns and connections. So it is a messy process. So if I may say, qualitative data analysis is a messy process. There's no way of making it in order. Like in physics, we have a way of doing putting things in order. But in qualitative data analysis, everything is messy. You can have a clean picture of your analysis only towards the end when you weave everything together or when you theorize out of the things that you have done or you have uh, uh, obtained so far. Okay. In some practices, the usual without any software and with limited understanding of the coding process, this could be enough. So can you imagine what you are seeing now? It's like looking at your handout. When you try to read your handout, you give some annotations, right? You put some things on the margin. You highlight, you put arrows, you put some bullets on the margin, you put some lines connecting different ideas or concepts. That's basically how you code. So if you know how to do that, you don't need this lecture because you know how to code. Okay, so what you need perhaps from this lecture is the process of conceptualization, the proper way of locating your own understanding vis-a-vis the understanding or the knowledge being shown by the source of information. This is a common practice. You can find people having, for example, 128 colors of Stabilobos, and then using these different colors in highlighting different concepts. Each color represents a different concept. So you can do that. But if you're a qualitative researcher and you are dealing with 100 to at least 100 pages of transcript and you use Stabilobos to color different uh, concepts, then perhaps on your third page, you forget already what was on the first page. You could forget already the color that you assign to what specific concept because it's manual. But if the point is, if you know how to do it, you know how to code qualitatively because the process of coding qualitative data is the same or follows the same logic. So, an example, you may find this. This looks familiar because this looks like your handout in your didactics class. We give you a handout and you annotate the handout on the margin, you put some arrows, and then you categorize. So this one is about confidence. This one is about social networking. This is about your reaction. Okay, so the same thing, except that there's a better way of organizing these things. I'd like to talk about thematic analysis. If you notice, when we try to highlight, underline, relate, we're actually relating themes. We're actually relating ideas. When you try to combine ideas, we're basically looking at themes. Okay, so I'd like to talk about thematic analysis. I'm going to present thematic analysis with a caution. Thematic analysis is not a research design, it's a tool. In fact, it's not a qualitative approach. You cannot say that this study follows the thematic qualitative approach. There's no such thing as that because thematic analysis cuts across all other qualitative approaches. So you can have thematic analysis in grounded theory. You can have thematic analysis in phenomenology. You can have thematic analysis in your um, ethnographic studies. Okay, so it cuts across all other qualitative approaches. TA or thematic analysis is not a method; it's a tool. It means that you are free to use thematic analysis even outside the realms of research. So in your assignment, where you look at different problems or challenges encountered in the teaching of mathematics, you can use thematic analysis. You can describe the process as thematic analysis. Right? So let's see how thematic analysis works. Okay, so what do you study? What are the sources of data for thematic analysis? Okay. You can look at the data corpus, all data, interviews, FGDs, documents. Data set, part of the corpus, which is just the interview, for example. So these are the hierarchy of the sources of data. So perhaps these are necessary to define. In the succeeding sections of this presentation, you will encounter these terms. So when I say it's a data corpus, it's the corpora, or the repository, or the storage of all your data. So it could be all the interviews, FGDs, documents. That's the data corpus. A data set is just part of the corpus. So if you extract the interview data, then that is the data set. It's part of the corpus. A data item is part of the data set. So for example, you you extracted the interviews. The data item pertains to one specific transcript among the many interviews. So that's a data item. A data extract is an individually coded chunk of data. For example, in that particular transcript of one participant, you highlighted a certain statement there, and that's the data extract. I want you to remember that in the succeeding sections of this presentation, interchangeably, I use indicators. So the word indicator that I will be using later is the same as data extract. It is the segment or part of your transcript of your data that is being highlighted because it is important. Okay, next. Let us now start talking about conceptualization. I told you kanina that I can only teach you conceptualization. Coding is very simple, but how you code according to your concept, according to your perspective, can never be taught. Okay, so perhaps before we do that, I'd like to stop again and invite you for some comments and insights. It's 9:25. Okay, anyone? Let's have Sir Steve.
Uh, Regarding with the conceptualization, I think uh, based on your discussion, sir, I think matutulungan kami nito talaga for the theory building perspective ng dissertation namin,
Okay.
because uh, as you have said, it relies heavily on the objective or purpose of the research. That's something I have gained on your discussion. Thank you, sir.
Maybe we can invite some from JRMSU. Who is left? There were two already who left because they have other classes. Maybe we can have Ma'am Cindy. Hi, Ma'am Cindy. Ma'am Cindy. Hello. Anyone? Oh, Ma'am Rosie. Magtawag ka na.
Hello. Actually, these my students are very eager, so I think anybody can volunteer to say something. Kiosco, I think, has something in mind.
Let's go.
Yes po. Ako po I'm pretty much impressed with the flow of the discussion. Kasi it's my first time to have a seminar regarding qualitative data analysis. Most of our seminars are focused on quantitative analysis. In terms of the content ng data analysis, ang pinakagusto kong part yung parang kasi pag quantitative data, whatever is the result, absolute na yun eh. Yun na yung result. Kaya lang
Yeah.
dito sa qualitative data, as mentioned by Sir, uh, it's negotiable kumbaga. Pwedeng ma-prove na tama yung idea mo or yung konsepto mo regarding dun sa concept. Kumbaga, it's negotiable. Hindi siya maituturing na eto lang yung sagot. Other might have different perspective dun sa pagko-code. Kaya ako excited ako sir yung magiging I'm very excited na gumawa ng qualitative data analysis kasi when I was in having my bachelor's degree, pag sinabi mo action research, may format lang na binibigay sa amin sir eh. And then we just have to follow. Kaya lang sabi mo nga dito sir na nakakatuwa, dapat yung researcher yung nagdi-dictate, nagda-direct kung ano yung method ng research and not the teacher or the professor. Yun lang sir. I'm very excited to know more about qualitative data analysis. Thank you po sir.
Thank you. Okay, so let's
Sir,
continue. Yeah, Sir Steve, go ahead.
may question lang po ako.
Yeah.
Kasi sabi niyo po sir, coding, so coding, kailangan yung researcher transcribe, siya yung nag-transcribe and then siya din yung magko-code. And then in the coding itself, it's highly subjective, right, sir?
That's right.
Because you are following the objective or purpose of your research. But sir, how can we say that your coding and the idea being conceptualized based on the codes you have made is really valid? Kasi parang meron din po kasing methods na yung inter-rater agreement something, may nabasa lang po ako na parang may isa din na magko-code na ganito, so parang mag-exchange codes kayo just to make or negotiate something. Pwede din po kaya yun?
Pwede naman, sir. We practice that as a form of quality audit in qualitative research or qualitative data analysis. But it may not be necessary. Again,
Okay po.
when we say it's valid, I'm sorry to disappoint everyone that validity has no place in qualitative research. Where do we anchor what is valid, or whose validation do we or whose validation standards do we abide by or do we follow? Okay, so because
Sa
uh,
quantitative paradigm po.
that's right, because you are operating from a very quantitative perspective. Later, Steve, I'll talk about the the so-called the holy trinity of research, the
Okay po.
the reliability, validity, and generalizability. We're so obsessed with these things because we are highly quantitative in our orientation. But to address your question, it may not be necessary to have that because the best validation of the self, or the best validation of qualitative research is the self. Okay, so that's why sometimes we also ask, we also raise the same question when we have conferences. Perhaps the reason why qualitative research is not that much popular in the Philippines is that we don't trust much the Filipinos. Do you feel that, like, if the person is reporting about narratives, for example, we always um yung nagdududa, yung parang ganun, yung parang sabi natin, hindi yan tama, totoo ba talaga yan, yung parang ganun. Yung parang because the nature, culture wise, maybe we really do not trust our sources of information. We are known to be people pleasers. For example, if you ask me about a feedback and you are the person who will be receiving the feedback, I have the tendency perhaps to please you with my responses. So it's the same thing when we gather data. Perhaps our respondents are thinking of the same thing. How can I please you with my response? And sometimes what is pleasant may not be what is true. So we cannot truly represent the the phenomenon because in the first place the participants are hesitant to give us the truth. So it's something that we can also argue that perhaps qualitative research may not be that good at all in the Philippines. But mind you, when I talk to other or from the qualitative researchers outside the Philippines, the problem is the same. It's not that popular. It's not that widely accepted. Even universities, they don't fund much qualitative data or qualitative research. It's the same thing. At any rate, going back to validation, the only thing I can say about validation is that there's no standard that we can say that it has to be the standard and we should follow the standard, hence the validation. The only validation measure we can say is that as long as you're able to get the information that can say something about the purpose of your research, that makes the process valid. What is validity in the first place? Validity is when you are asking questions that could direct you to the information that you need. It means that the extent that you are able to get through the mind or the personality of the person or the source of information is in itself a valid measure. But we don't talk much about validity in qualitative research because we don't have to say it's correct, it's wrong. When you report, we refrain from saying this is correct, this is wrong. We simply provide the concepts. And we're not saying that these concepts are wrong, these concepts are right. There's a way of validating that. And that's when you do quantitative research out of the results of a qualitative research. For example, I'd like to go back to the context of Steve. Steve is working on a theory building qualitative research in his dissertation. So, what do you hope to produce in your dissertation? You hope to produce a theory. What does a theory? How does a theory look like? Theory is composed of different dimensions or different concepts. Okay, so you'll be producing apparently with some mid-range theories. So it has concepts, it has dimensions, and descriptions of dimensions. Okay, so the best thing to validate that this theory is representative of the context being investigated is to convert dimensions and descriptions in the theory into a questionnaire. You develop a tool or a test whose items or stems in the survey are extracted from the definition or description of your theory. In the first place, the surveys that we are using now, the very common surveys, the very common questionnaires, most of these questionnaires come from a qualitative investigation. Where do you think they got the scenarios they write in the questionnaire? These are coming from actual responses of participants, and they try to group them together thematically. And now, when you do quantitative analysis, you can prepare a questionnaire, do some factor analysis. Perhaps you can do exploratory factor analysis. You can see from the factor loading, if you're familiar with that. In the factor loading, you can see there how many of the items load on the same factors. That means that you are actually asking questions that can address that particular factor or that particular dimension. So you see, there's a link between quali and quanti, and to highlight validation there, that could be a great validation of the analysis in your qualitative research. It's valid to talk about validation this time because it's not just qualitative research anymore. you already extend beyond quali, and that's doing some quantitative data analysis. Do you follow? Familiar with EFA or CFA, Steve?
Structural equation modeling po.
We only heard the last sentence, Steve. Can you repeat that?
Yung regarding sa structural equation modeling po, yung
Ayun,
sa
so yeah.
factor
Yeah,
analysis po.
we can use SEM. We can use Amos if ano. Yeah. So that's what I meant.
Thank,
You can have the
thank you, sir.
constructs, you can have the variables defined by the qualitative research, and then create a questionnaire for each of these variables. And then you try to explore that using SEM and see for in your factor loading if these items in the questionnaire really load to the particular variable, and do something else like relationship of variables, the usual that you do in your statistics. So that's a way of validating your theory. So if the theory survives, then that theory will be uh, adopted by others. If in your analysis the theory is refuted, then that means that something that needs to be done regarding the proposed theory. So that's the direction, and that's how perhaps you can validate quantitatively. Okay,
Thank, thank you, sir.
let's continue.
Sir, question po.
Yeah, Dave.
Okay, sir. I would like to take this opportunity to clarify ano lang po, some things
Mm-mm.
po. Di ba, sir, uh, when we do a qualitative research, so after, for example, we gather our data, so we do the transcription, we do the coding.
Mm-hmm.
Ang question ko po, sir, is when do we consider a code to be a thing na po? I mean, is there a certain percentage, for example, you have 10 respondents and then 5 among them may commonality sa kanilang responses. Yung response yan, no, yung particular response na yun ay mako-consider na theme. Paano po galimbawa pag isa lang siya o dalawa? Ano po yun? Hindi na po siya i-consider na theme, i-mention lang po siya. Yun po yung question.
Okay. There is no hard rule as to numbers. Okay. Qualitative researchers are really sensitive and allergic to numbers. We don't count. The important thing here is the concept emerged. So if there's one concept that is relevant to the objective of your research, you can put a code, and that code automatically becomes a theme. Later, we will talk about the hierarchy of themes. Okay, so there is no rule as to how many should constitute. The only thing I can say is that at least one. You can create a code or a theme with one indicator. The important thing in qualitative research is the idea, not how many times and how many people say the idea. As long as the idea is there, as long as the idea emerged, you treat that as a concept. You treat that as a theme. And it's your responsibility now to investigate further about this theme, because there's an interaction between you and the data. If you just wait until how many students will or how many respondents will say it, it's not it's not being reflexive in your analysis. Okay, so it's not how many. The answer is as long as there's one, it's a theme. And later we'll talk about the hierarchy of themes. Good question.
Yes,
Sometimes,
sir.
if I may share, sometimes I find it funny because there are researchers, qualitative researchers, who claim they have qualitative research and end up counting the cases or counting the occurrences of certain indicator. For example, they count how many people say it, how many times the word was mentioned. It's not like that, because apparently we're not counting in qualitative research. What is important is that there's a concept that emerged, there's a concept or the idea that came out. Okay. Let's have the others share after this. 9:41. Kaya natin to. Coding is assigning the best fit term. Okay, so when you say you're coding, you are actually looking at, sorry, when you say you're coding, you're actually looking at the best temporary term or the best fit temporary term to assign to an idea or a group of related ideas. If I'm going to use the word indicator or data extract, I could say that coding is assigning the best the fit temporary term to an indicator or a group of indicators. What are indicators again? These are segments of the data. This could be statements of the participants. This could be notations of the researcher. This could be comments of the participants. So any phrase, word, or sentences in the transcript of interview or in the transcript that you are analyzing can be assigned a code which is the best fit word or the best fit term to describe that highlighted segment or a group of highlighted segments. The reason why I emphasize that it is temporary is because coding process is highly trial and error. You are trying to fit the best fit term to a particular indicator, but it is usual, it is normal that along the way, when you add more indicators to that initial group of indicators, you will see a different concept emerging. When you see a different concept emerging, it is when you start or modifying your code. Codes are temporary. It means that it's only towards the end that you can finalize your code. Do you follow? Are you with me? Okay, so
Yes, sir.
later. Yeah,
Sir, yes, sir.
nakuha niyo yun. Dinahandahan ko kasi masyado siyang importante. Let's
Yes,
talk
sir.
about indicators. The indicators represent what is important for you. We call it the significant indicators or the significant data extracts. Why are they significant? Why are they important? What's our criteria when we say these are important words or indicators? What do they indicate? We go back to the purpose of our research. The criteria or the standard that we use when we decide if it is important or not is the purpose of our research. How do we translate that into practice? We ask ourselves, does this term or does this phrase or does this statement lead me to answer the question of this research? What do you want to find out in your research in the first place? If you want to find out the practices of teaching mathematics, then you always focus on that purpose. Remember step number 2 last time? Focus the analysis. Go back always to the objective of your research. So if you go back to the objective of your research, you ask yourself, does this lead me to the objective of my research? Can this potentially help me answer my research question? So that's how you will decide whether it is important or not. So when it is important, extract that, get that, or highlight that, the usual process. You highlight that because that's important. Di ba when you highlight a phrase in your handout, it's because it's important. Maybe that falls under the category of what will come out in the exam. So maybe your teacher gave you a hint or a tip to the exam, and that falls under the tip or the specific categories provided by the teacher. So you highlight that, and because you see that as important. Why did you see it as important? Because it aligns with the purpose of why you are reading the handout in the first place. So if the purpose of research is to find out the practices, then you're looking for statements that will lead you to that. Okay, so coding is about naming those indicators that you have extracted. Coding is about assigning a term to those indicators or group of indicators. And this explains why I cannot teach conceptualization, because coding is highly dependent on conceptualization. And conceptualization relies on yourself. How do you name it? The term that you will use is highly dependent on your orientation. Do you see that as a pattern? Because when you assign a term, the term that you use or the language that you use or the words that you use will be dependent on your orientation, because the words that will come out of your mouth are representative of your entire faculty, your epistemology, your practice. These are all manifestations of what you believe in or what you think is important to you. That's why we started with the epistemology of qualitative research, because in naming the indicators, you will be using terms that are highly aligned with your own worldview. So I cannot dictate that for you, and nobody else can dictate that for you. Do you follow? So coding is highly
Yes.
personal. Conceptualization is highly personal. Okay? And nobody has the right to tell you that your process of your conceptualization is wrong. There's no such thing as wrong conceptualization. There's just a difference in perspective. And it happens. The reason why many students fail to defend their qualitative research is when somebody who is highly quantitative and who cannot understand the process of qualitative data analysis sits in the panel. Apparently, they cannot understand that. They cannot accept the fact that research is subjective, because quantitative researchers believe that research is exact, research is objective, research has to be following the standards. They cannot accept that there's a kind of research that's highly dependent on the context of the studied item or studied object or the researcher himself. So that's the thing. And you have to be very careful with that. If you want to do a qualitative research in your dissertation, pick somebody who is into qualitative research to sit as your panel members. It's difficult to get through the lens or the perspectives of quantitative researchers when you're doing a qualitative research. I'm not saying that we are right in qualitative research and the quantitative researchers are wrong. What I'm saying is just we are just coming from different perspectives. If you have the chance to read about positivism and the extreme end, which is some kind of constructivism, then you can understand why quantitative researchers think that way and why qualitative researchers think this way. Okay. The next thing that I'd like to say is the memo wing process. Memos are very important. When you assign a code to an indicator, for example, it is the product of conceptualization. How would you convince the reader of your work that you are using or you are reflecting your own and that of the source of information, their knowledge and understanding in your analysis. That can be done through memos. Memos are your documentation of the coding process. So when we say that I am coding it as this, you write something about that decision of yours. It means that every action in your process of coding must come with a corresponding memo. Memos are descriptions. Memos are explanations. They are elaborations. They are justification of your action. It means that if you replace a code with another term, you write a memo about that. When you add a code to a certain group of codes, you add a memo. You write a memo about that. Memos are crucial because you can give the memo as a form of audit trail. Audit trail is to navigate the readers to the evolution of the codes in your analysis. From the memos, it you could see or you should be able to describe to the readers how you arrived at that particular code. Where did it come from? So the readers have to see how the codes evolved. It started with the term. Then eventually it became like this. It became like this in the final output. So coding has to come with memos. So coding and memoing go together. So we don't just code, we memo. Another important purpose of memo is to remind you about your codes. Because sometimes we forget the characteristics of our code or the description of our code. We simply call it as is or as that. And we forget the reason why we're calling it like that or why we're calling it that with that code. It is important that we have a memo to describe why we are calling it as that so that the next time we see something that is related to that, then we can definitely say that this fits here because based on my memo, this code is described as like this. So what's the implication in your report when you have the memo? When you write the memo, you are basically writing the report. So in qualitative research, report writing is again not a standalone process because report writing happens the moment you start the formal analysis. Because when you describe the codes, you are actually writing your report. When you look at qualitative research reports, you can see there they are presenting the different constructs or the themes, and then they're describing them. Your description to those themes can be extracted from your memo. So it's actually helping you to facilitate the reporting, the formal reporting process or writing process. Okay, so if you link that to your practices in quantitative research, the codes, once these mature, can become the variables. And I guess you're familiar with variables. Some variables have corresponding sub constructs or sub dimensions. It's the same thing because in coding, some mature codes could have some subcodes or supporting codes. These are the same ideas that we have in quantitative research. Some variables will have corresponding sub variables. for example. For example, if you look at attitude, attitude could have different subcategories, and these are the same thing. And in qualitative research, when you write your memo, you are writing the description of the variable and the sub variables. In memoing, you are writing the description of the main code as well as the sub codes. You follow? I hope that I hope it's clear. You can have a picture of that in the next slides. I'm about to give you something to work on, but my understanding is that not everybody was able up, to install the trial version of the Maxqda, but I can uh, describe anyway. These are the same things that I have discussed. Okay, so maybe this can help you. The thematic analysis procedure. We are not saying that these are the specific steps that you should follow all the time. You can diverge and make your own procedure of analyzing data thematically. Okay, so normally we can start with familiarizing with the data. How do we familiarize with the data? So, what do you have right now? Is it an interview? If you have an interview, then familiarize your interview data by reading and rereading and re-rereading and re-re-rereading the data and taking note of some initial ideas or your initial impression of the data or initial appraisal of the data. Okay, familiarize. When you some people will normally ask me, is it necessary? My answer is always yes. But you can facilitate this. You can reduce the number of times that you will read and reread the data if you are the ones conducting the interview and doing the transcription, because those processes will definitely familiarize you with the data. If somebody else did that for you, then you will have to spend uh, some time reading and rereading the data to familiarize your data. Okay? Generating initial codes. So when you start extracting or highlighting or picking up some segments in the transcript that you think are important, then you put some initial codes. In my previous statement, I called this as temporary codes or the interim codes, or what you can say in the meantime about the that segment. Then you can describe the codes together to look for the themes. So the code is based on the indicators. So it's the indicator that you assigned an initial code. And later, when you want to advance into a higher form of conceptualization, you will no longer deal with the indicators, but you will deal with the codes or the initial codes in your code system. So theme or assigning a theme is basically looking at the existing codes and see how these codes are related. And then reviewing the themes, looking at if the themes are highly aligned with the coded extracts. This is where you compare the themes with the indicators now, and then coming up with a map of themes or graphics of themes. Normally, we see that as our frameworks, but in here, we can have that as our temporary map of related themes that could later on become your theory or the theoretical statement. Okay. Then there's defining and refining the themes by changing the names to suit the emergent emerging relationship of the codes, and then writing the report. Okay, so here's how it may look like in your actual data analysis. You have the significant indicators. What are significant indicators again? These are segments in the data that are important or significant to you. How do you decide if it is significant or important? You go back to the question of your research or the purpose of your research. So perhaps you extract indicator one. It's important because it could answer or it could lead me to the answer I am looking for. So you put that. The basic coding happens when you see the unique characteristic of that indicator or a group of indicators. We look at the second column, the categories. You can use code to represent categories. For example, when you group indicators 1, 5, and 4, they can be named as 1 or they can be named with a term. The reason why you are grouping indicators 1, 5, and 4 is that they share a common characteristic or they have similarities. Conceptually, they are related. So now that you have identified their potential relationship, you can name that relationship with a temporary term. We call it the code. That temporary term in our illustration, it's called category 1. That temporary term is the best fit term that could represent the conceptual similarity of indicators 1, 5, and 4. Do you follow? So if you see that 1, 5, and 4 are conceptually related, then put that conceptual relationship as the label of this group of indicators. It may look simple in this illustration because I only have 9 indicators. In reality, it is not as simple and as clean as this, especially when you deal with thousands of indicators. In qualitative research, we are not just dealing with hundreds, we're dealing with thousands of indicators or related or important statements. If you look at indicator 7, it's the only indicator in that particular category. This illustrates my answer to the concern of Sir Dave kanina. How many should constitute a category? The answer is there's no quantification in qualitative research. One indicator can become a category or a code. In fact, one code can become one theme later. If it is really unique and you can never conceptually link that to another code and it's highly important in your analysis, then that could become a theme. Okay? If you notice in our in questionnaire in quantitative research, there are questionnaires that have very limited questions. For example, isa, dalawa lang. Isang variable na yun. That's because there is a limited understanding and a limited set of indicators that could describe that variable. That's basically the reason why we have no set number of items for every variable in our questionnaire. Some variables could have as low as 1 or 2 questions. Do you follow? So if you just to ride on your quantitative orientation, if you look at this as a questionnaire, then look at the theme column in column 3. This could be your major variables. Each of the major variables have corresponding sub-constructs or constructs or concepts. We call that categories. Category 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And each category has corresponding indicators. Where are your statements or questions in the questionnaire now? They come from the indicators. So indicators are the best sources of stems or questions in your questionnaire. And when you group these indicators together, they represent the construct or the variable in your framework. And it's the same thing that you will also find out when you do the factor analysis. When you process the qualitative or the results of your survey, you examine whether the hypothesized factor loading will be validated or verified using factor analysis. So you will find out whether indicators 1, 5, and 4, which are translated into questions 1, 5, and 4, really represent category 1 or construct 1 in a way that addresses the issue of validation. You have validated that indicator 1, 5, and 4 answers one specific construct. How does that validate your qualitative process? It only shows that you were able to ask the right questions in your qualitative investigation because you arrived at the answers that you wanted. Do you follow? 'Di ba? Validation is basically asking the question that will lead us to the answers that want or that we desire. Okay, so you can picture this out in processing your transcript. Okay, so this represents hierarchy of codes in your analysis. So category is a code, theme is a code. Code is simply the term that you assign to a particular indicator or a particular group of related indicators or related codes. Another way of representing that is through this illustration. When you are doing a theory building research, it may look like this. You start with the specific data. Where does your specific data come from? From interviews or from the key informants? Perhaps when you look at the lowest level in the hierarchy, you can combine one indicator with another. Combining that indicators translate or underscores a particular conceptual relationship. You represent that conceptual relationship with a code. We call it a category, for example. Okay? And when you analyze categories, you will form another code. For example, if you combine category 1 and 2, there is a conceptual link between the two. So the next level of coding is to describe that conceptual link between categories 1 and 2. You can call it the theme. Again, theme is a code, category is a code. A code is a term. A code is a name. A code is a phrase. A code is a concept. Any word, any term that could best capture the relationship of the elements under that particular code. So in this case, category 1 must be the best fit term to describe the conceptual relationship of indicators 1 and 2. In the same manner, theme 1 must be the best fit term to describe the conceptual link between categories 1 and 2. Assigning the code or the name again is dependent on your conceptual framing or your philosophical framing. This means that the name that I'm going to assign in category 1 and category 2 may be different when these indicators will be processed by a different coder or a different researcher. So it is normal in qualitative research that even if you have the same set of indicators, the categories will be different. And if subsequently or in effect, the themes will also be different. Do you follow? Saan papasok ang intercoder reliability na sinasabi ni Sir Steve? Papasok yan kapag nakaset ang ating mga themes and categories. There's a kind of qualitative data analysis which is highly dependent on an existing framework or a theory, meaning to say you will not be naming categories and themes from scratch. The themes and categories are predetermined and pre-assigned. The only thing that the researcher will do is to make sure that the indicators are being placed in the right categories and the indicators or the number of indicators fall on uh, each category are similar or identical. And that's where we can compare intercoder agreement. Okay, so picture this out in your analysis. So my next, the question that you should ask this time is, was I following a framework in my research wherein the variables are predefined, or I am investigating something inductively wherein categories and themes are allowed to emerge? So if you are in that particular case, then the burden of naming or assigning codes is on you. You have to conceptually find or examine the relationship of the variable, the indicators, to see what term best fits to describe that related concepts or related ideas. Follow? You can place that in another matrix. For example, this one. You have the significant indicators, the categories, the basic theme, the organizing theme, and the global theme. That's splitting the theme into two. All right. So if you do this in Excel, apparently all you need to do is that just list in the first column extracts of data from your transcript. Just pull that out, place that in one column. And then later, look for related indicators and place them together, like what we did in like what we illustrated here. Maybe you can group together indicators 1, 5, and 4 and then put the category there. Okay, so that's how we do that in Excel. But there's a faster way of doing that using another software. In the end, your analysis may look like this. You can have the basic theme. You can have basic, you can group together the basic themes to form an organizing theme. And the organizing themes can be formed together to form the global theme. The global theme is normally the purpose of your research. So if your goal in your investigation is to look at the best practices of teaching mathematics, then in the middle you have the best practices of teaching mathematics or how to teach mathematics. And then you have categories of how to best teach mathematics or the didactics of mathematics. And then you have the sub constructs or the sub elements of the best practices of teaching mathematics. Follow? This is the goal of your research. If you're doing a theory building research or theory oriented research, you may also aim for this in the end. Okay, so I'll speak a little about validity so that I can have time to demo. Validity is not a qualitative thing, but in order to address the concerns of quantitative researchers about validity and reliability, I'll talk about validity and reliability briefly. What's reliability? It's the consistency, right? For example, if you are going to give the same test to the same set of samples in a different period of time, you will arrive at a similar response or similar set of responses. Validity is about getting or asking the question that will lead you to the answers you desire or you want. Or it's basically getting the correct information or the right information given your process or your question. So, in reliability, the only thing that we can say is that if you represent fully the words, the ideas, and the experiences of the key informant, you are addressing the issue of reliability. How does that happen? If you are honest in your report, you reported the words, the ideas, the experiences of the key informant. When you ask the same informant again next time, perhaps after 2 months, apparently you will arrive at a similar answer or a similar set of answers. But if you put words on the mouth of the participants or the key informants, if you analyze the data of the key informants according to your own standards, according to what you believe is correct, apparently, when you ask again the participant, there will be a disconnect between your report of the previous interview and the current results of the interview because you misrepresented the participant in your report. So, reliability is just being faithful to the ideas of the source of information or the key informants. It's not about subscribing to his idea, it's about reporting the idea. If you disagree, put in your report that you disagree, but you should not change the ideas and experiences and phrase it the way you want it to appear to your readers. That addresses or that raises the question of reliability. Apparently, because again, if you ask that same person again, the tendency is he will say the same thing. But previously, you have reported a different report of the same thing. Right now, there will be inconsistency between the two reports. So that this is where reliability comes in. The problem of reliability comes in. Validity is about getting through the informant's faculty so that you will be able to extract the information that you need. If you are not able to get into the faculty of the informant or the key informant, you will not be able to get accurate responses from from the key informant. For example, you interview as a superior. Maybe you are the principal in the school. You are interviewing a teacher. You know that there's a power imbalance between the two of you. because you are the superior and you're interviewing a teacher. The natural tendency of the teacher is to say something that can please you as the superior. So it affects the validity of the process. So you avoid these kinds of scenarios. Ask somebody to interview the teacher. It's because you are in in a very literal sense. You have walls. You have power imbalance. Okay, so there's a way of doing that also, or avoiding that. Maybe you can establish rapport uh, prior to the conduct of interview. Do not interview inside your office because your office is a representation of power. When you put the participant inside your office, the power manifests. Bring the participant somewhere that is common and neutral. Bring the participant to the garden. Conduct the interview in the garden. The garden is a common space. You have that is not a representation of your power. Or invite the participant to a coffee shop. Talk about that in a coffee shop. It means that you have uh, removed the wall, being the superior to the participant. So there are ways of avoiding that to enhance the validity of the process. If you did not do that, if you maintain your power as the superior over the key informant, you may not be able to get the honest and the accurate response. If you do not get the honest and the accurate response, there's a question of validity there because you will not report, apparently, what is truly representative of the context of the participant. If you're asking them of their experiences, they will just talk to you about the pleasant experiences to boost your ego as the superior. They have the tendency to do that. And it's not what we aim for in qualitative research because we want to explore the real situation or the real scenario. Okay, so that's how we address reliability and validity. Generalizability is not our goal. It's highly quantitative. We don't generalize because qualitative research is highly subjective. It talks about that person. If you want to generalize, then create an instrument out of my theory and administer that instrument to other contexts. If you come up with a same factor loading, then just as I proposed in my theory, then my theory is applicable to all, or my theory is generalizable. But that is not my goal. Whether it becomes generalizable or not, my results are in place or are intact. We do not rely on quantitative researchers to to test the generalizability of the theory, because the theories that we produce in qualitative research are good in it on its own. Okay. And then the research audit trail, I talked about memoing already, so I'll skip that part. All right. So I asked you last time, I asked you at the start to download the free trial or the trial version of the Maxqda. But if you were not able to download it, it's fine. I'm going to just the. Mm, I'm just going to demonstrate how it's done in Maxqda. Before we go to that, I'd like to open the floor again for questions. You may have questions.
Hello?
Yes, Ma'am Angelica.
Yes, Angelica.
Sir, I have a question. If it
Yes.
is, ano po, kapag po sa qualitative, talaga pong ano siya, paano po ang data niya? Wala po siyang involvement ng numbers or numerals. Yung
It
po
could.
sa
It
qualitative.
it may involve numbers. It may deal with numbers, but it is not necessary.
How about sir kung ang kanyang research ay qualitative tapos nag-ano ka ng percentage? Halimbawa, survey. nandun yung background nila, familial perspective na sino yung nakatira sa urban, sa
It's fine.
suburban, sa ganon.
It's
Pwede,
fine.
okay lang po yun, sir, kahit may mga percentage sa quali.
Yeah, because in the first place, the ones you are describing are not part of the data that you will that form part of your research, because these are demographics that's part of the methods. You describe the demographics of your participants, demographics that have bearing in your analysis. You describe that in your methods when you describe your participants. So in a way, it's still qualitative research because those percentages that you present are not treated as the analysis method or a methodical process.
Okay, thank
And
you, sir.
there are even some, as I've said kanina, there are even some who put percentages in their report of qualitative research, like they count how many students said it. Uh, Maybe that can be, that can be acceptable. I'm not saying it's wrong. There are journals who will accept that, and there are qualitative researchers who can understand that. Personally, I cannot understand that. Uh, it's beyond my comprehension. Uh, Apparently, that's the reason why we do qualitative research, because there are things that we cannot represent with numbers. And if you're going to force representing qualitative concepts with numbers, then you're in the first place, it refuse. I mean, it doesn't support anymore the original idea of why we have a qualitative research. Qualitative research is a form of pagre-rebelde. If you notice historically, we rebel against the very positivist thinking, the quantitative ways of doing things, for the very reason that there are social phenomena that we cannot describe fully by numbers. So that's why we refrain from using numbers. But there are those journals who will accept that.
Okay, sir. Thank you po.
Maybe I can call the rest, those who were not able to speak yet.
Yes, maybe we can hear from Andrew or Neil Andrew Kakas and Adrian Bugay.
Yes po, hello.
Yes, Adrian.
Yes. With the coding process po, no, actually I'm still digesting with the information that was already discussed by our presenter. At least mag-share na lang ko ng insight ko and then reflections na instead. So, siguro before we proceed on dealing with the coding processes, we should start. Yung bottom line is to ask ourselves. Siguro we should have like this assessment or pre-assessment on about the terms, phrase, or even the statements, because these terms, statements, and phrase may lead us to answer the research, and kailangan po we should share with a purpose or with the objective, for it will lead us to gain some potential answers of the research. And then right after that, so we can do the memoing na, and then yung phases of the thematical analysis naman po. We should familiarize ourselves with the data by transcribing the data and then rereading the data, rereading and rereading again, for us to be to have makapag-generate tayo ng mga initial codes that we will use for our research po.
Okay, thank you. Ma'am Juvie? Can I hear from Ma'am Juvie? Ma'am Juvie. Buena agua.
Sir, so no questions so far, sir. Thank you po.
Sige, I'll ask you a question later. Sige. So I'll walk you through the process of coding using a software. Um, you have right now they're offering a 30-day trial of the software. So if you and they're also offering a very affordable package for PhD students. Um, you can avail that. It's in their website. But if you can find another way of doing it, the better. Anyway, this is your course requirement, so maybe it won't take you more than 1 month to process the data. And later, when you like the analysis, maybe you can explore some other ways of doing it, like using Excel or using other free softwares. Okay, so I'll be using MaxQDA. I've been using MaxQDA ever since I started Quali. I find it very useful, and I was able to follow all the updates of MaxQDA. I'm a fan of MaxQDA, but feel free to explore others. There's In Vivo. In the Philippines, In Vivo is more popular. We have WebQDA, and there are others out there. Um, the only good thing, the good thing about MaxQDA is the ability of MaxQDA to organize your memos. That is very important to me because, as I've said, memo is your documentation. Every time I write a report, a qualitative report, I just go to my memos. If I extract the memo, I have already the research report. I will just edit the memo because the memo itself is already organized according to the themes or according to the codes that I write. So it's very easy to write a research report. Again, in the process of coding, you're already writing your report if you do your memo. Okay, so allow me to turn off my camera. I need to use the port for my USB. Okay, I'm going to share my desktop so that you can follow how I load or how I open the software. Okay, maybe I can close my reminders so that you won't see. Okay, I'm using a portable version of the MaxQDA. Um, the reason why I want the portable version is the portable version can be read and can be used by any computer. So, like me, I switch from Mac to Windows every now and then, depending on where I am and which office. I have so many things. So I switch from one computer to another. So I use portable because um, the software installed is not on the computer but on the USB or the flash drive. So this is how the portable version looks like. It's in your flash drive, and when you open your flash drive, you have there already the installer, and you have there the soft all the projects you have. For example, um, you can have there your Mac installer or Mac software. You can have there your Windows software. So in this case, because we'll be using Windows, I have here the Windows shortcut. Okay, so this will look the icon may look like this in your desktop if you install the MaxQDA. So the same process as opening any regular application or program in your computer. Double click or right click and then open with or open the program. The version 2020 is highly improved in terms of its graphics and in the interface. So it looked very beautiful already. Um, the moment you open your program, it will prompt you this window. It will ask you to either create a new project So when you say project, we're referring to analysis or research. For example, if you're doing your dissertation, you can give a title to your project as my dissertation, for example. Okay. And then it can also ask you to open a project. When you say open a project, it means that you will open your existing project. So the next time you go back to the analysis, you can just open the project and search where you saved that particular project. And then you can have open examples. Maybe you can explore examples later after my presentation. Okay, so the key thing to do is to download and install it. By the way, just to confirm, you're seeing my screen now, right? You're following me, right?
Sir.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, okay.
Yes po.
So you're
Yes,
seeing
sir.
everything on my
Yes,
screen,
sir.
my
Yes.
desktop. Okay. This is the Maxqda Analytics Pro because the Analytics Pro will have the capability of linking or converting your qualitative report or qualitative analysis into some quantitative data. And it will ask you to count, and they will make sense of your counting and do some usual uh, quantitative statistical analysis like correlation and some forms of comparative analysis. But I won't go to that because I don't want you to take advantage of that feature. I can encourage you to do some modeling later, but or validation of models later through model analysis of your or model analysis using statistics, but I won't go to that. I won't go that far. Okay, so for example, you want to start a new project. So definitely you'll just click new project, and then it will prompt you to ask where you want to save the project. So save your project in the area that you can easily locate. So for example, in the desktop, so you can save your project in the desktop, and then you can assign a name to that project. For example, my dissertation, for example. Okay, and then click save. Okay. Um, I am going to introduce to you now the key features of the Maxqda 2020. By the way, the good thing about Maxqda is that whenever there's an update, even if you purchase the Maxqda 1, you will be able to benefit the Maxqda 2020 just for one license. They will not, or they ask for a very minimal fee for the very old ones to upgrade. But most of the time, the upgrades are free. I started with a 10. So, yun. Long time ago. That was about 10 years ago. Ibang-iba pa yung itsura nun. Okay, so I'd like to introduce the different features of this or the different functions of your Maxqda. So again, we are analyzing a qualitative data. Okay, so it means that we must have a qualitative data to analyze. There are four main windows in your Maxqda program. We have here on your upper left, we have the document browser, or the document system. Do you see that? This part. Can you also see my cursor if I move the cursor like this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I
Yes,
can
sir.
illustrate where I'm pointing at. Okay. So this one is the document system. The document system is where you save your data. For example, in the documents, this is where you can have your data sets, maybe interviews, for example. So you can right click at this part. It will give you these options. You can create a new document group. For example, you will be dealing with more than one data set. You can perhaps create a document group for your interviews. You can create a document group for your FGD. It's up to you. So you can create a new document group, or you can import documents. Import documents is basically to put the data to the program. Why is it necessary? When you say import talagang kinuha niya. So ibig sabihin kahit saan mo dadalhin yung analysis your project na yon, binaon niya na yung data mo. So hindi lang sa unit ng computer nakasave yun sa local. Nakasave na siya sa mismong project. So that's the good thing about that. Even if you're not using a portable Maxqda, nakapasok siya sa project itself, yung iyong documents. So for example, import documents, the usual process of importing documents. So what are the different document types that it can read? So these are all the document types it can read. So these are basically data or documents that
Ano?
are that
Bakit?
may
Naniningil? Ito din, nawawala.
ako nawawala ako.
Nasaan ba? Saan bahay?
Can you mute Madam Host?
Sorry, sir. Sorry po.
Okay. All right. So I'm showing here that the Maxqda can read a wide array of file types. It can read .doc.docx, RTF, PDF, XLS, XLSX, PNG, JPEG, JPEG, GIF, all those things. Because you can analyze pictures, for example. You can analyze videos, for example. You can analyze you can analyze anything. You can analyze qualitatively a quantitative data, for example, in Excel. Anyway, you want to do that. Okay, so locate where you placed that file, for example. For example, this one is, I'm going to look for other file types, files. Okay. Maybe we can read something about literature review. Okay, so you just click the file and then click open. If you want to upload or import the files all together, then you can just use Control A. By the way, most of the common controls in your word processor works in Maxqda. Okay, so you can click open, and if you notice, it loads under the documents. Mean to say, you can treat this as your data, for example. I cannot show an actual data, apparently, because I should not do that. I'm showing this because in most cases, I'm using Maxqda for literature review. You know that in literature review, the same thing happens. You thematically analyze the data and you come up with a solid framework out of your thematic analysis of literature. And that's where many of the researchers fail to do literature review. This is a good help in your literature review. Use Maxqda in organizing your ideas to write in the introduction section of your research out of your literature review. So this one is the document system. So every time there's a new data set, you put that in your document system. Next is the document browser. Okay, so over here we have the document browser. If you close this window, you can see the document browser. You can see the actual document. Document browser is where you can find the actual document. This is where you will do the coding or you will do the highlighting and all the stuff. Okay. The other window is the code system. The code system is where you write the code. Okay, so if you're working on a project that has predetermined code system based on a framework, then you can find the codes here. You can input the codes here before you start analyzing the data. But if it is a free analysis or a free qualitative data analysis, then you can start reading here and then start creating the code in the code system. Okay. The other window that which I closed a while ago is the retrieve segments. This is where you can find the retrieve the segments in in the text or in the data that are given a code or that are assigned a code, and you can also see there the code being assigned to that. I'm going to show an actual output later, but I will just navigate through these commands or basic commands of um, the Maxqda. Okay, so you can also decide to close these windows. You just click X if you want to close that, just so you have a better view of the word, for example. And here, when you have already shown the document or the data, you can also close this one. The four windows correspond to this. So if you want to bring that document system back, just click this. It brings the document system back. If you want to bring the retrieve segments back, you can click that. It brings the document system back. Okay, so let's look at the process of coding. Remember, coding is the actual practice of assigning a name to a particular segment of the data. Okay, so how do we do that? Imagine that you have already familiarized the data, you have read and reread the data, and now you are ready to formally code the data yourself. Okay, so you can start reading. So when you start reading, what you notice is that you tend to stop reading at a particular statement or phrase or word that you think is important to you based on the purpose of your research. We call that the significant indicator. Okay, so once you encounter the significant indicator, do not wait for any other hint. Code immediately that indicator. How do you do that? So if you are reading, you encountered something, then you encountered something significant, highlight immediately that significant something. So the process of highlighting is the same as the usual highlighting process in any word processing program. So highlight that. Can you see that? By the way, you can increase uh, the size. You can zoom in, zoom out to be more readable. Is it better now? Okay, so if you see if you notice, I have highlighted that segment. What can help you decide whether it needs to be highlighted or not? The purpose of your research. Remember when we talk about focus the analysis, go back to the purpose of the research, because the purpose of your research will help you decide whether that segment is significant or not. When you see that this segment is significant, then highlight that. Highlight and then start coding. How do you start coding? Okay, here in the code system, you can create a code, create a subcode, or change the position of the code. You'll have an example. There is one coded segment there. Because you are uh, creating a code out of the coded segment, you will start from scratch. Ito yung sinabi ko kanina na this is an example of theory building research wherein everything emerges from the data. Unlike when you do a confirmatory qualitative data analysis, the codes are preset here. So you can imagine there is already a set of codes here, and all you need to do is just highlight and then link the segment to the code. Here it's different because before you link the code to the segment or the indicator, you have to create the code first and you have to decide the name of the code first. Do you follow? So it's more complicated. Okay, that's why many of the researchers want to do the confirmatory first. There's a framework they follow, and the code system is already intact. All they need to do is just highlight and decide which of the codes the highlighted segment belongs to. Okay, so code system. You can create a code. You can click this plus button here and create a code. This is how it will look like when you create a code. So you can have the code title. What is the code title again? That is the best temporary fit term to describe that highlighted segment. So apparently, you only have one segment there that you can describe with your code. So your code this time must be highly temporary because it is the very initial code that you can describe that particular highlighted segment. Sometimes we use in vivo code in the very first part of the analysis. In vivo is the direct statement or the direct phrase extracted from the highlighted segment. For example, if it is in vivo, you can have a uh, literature-based uh, critical analysis. Literature-based critical analysis. You notice that the code that I assigned is or can be found in the text that I highlighted. We call that the in vivo actual statement or an actual code found in the data. Because maybe at this very point in your analysis, this segment, while you see it as important, you cannot imagine yet the very sophisticated code that you can assign to that. And we also discourage putting a very sophisticated code in this very stage of the analysis because that's forcing. It may not talk about that at all. So allow some in vivo codes to, or allow to use in vivo codes at this point. Anyway, later, when you will combine this segment with another segment, you will realize that there's something else that can best describe that. Do you follow? So these are all temporary. And again, trial and error. Code memo is what is very important. So again, memoing is writing something that describes your action or that elaborates or that explains your action in the process of coding. So in the first code memo, maybe you can have a description of the code. You can copy that, paste that in the code memo, and then put some initial description of that. Um, Maybe you can have a sample initial description of the code. So that's your memo. Right? So and then you click OK. Your code now appears here. By the way, kanina there has to be a color that you can assign to the code. The default is blue. Okay, so it means that the highlighted part will be colored blue. All right, so now you can see here that there's a memo about that particular code. It is important that the first few lines of your memo is a key description of the code, because like this one, if you hover your mouse to that memo, it shows the first three lines or the first few description. If you are confused, for example, there's a portion here in your data that you want to code, but you are not sure which among the existing codes you will put it to, these key descriptions can help you decide that. Ito pala is this one. Ito pala is this. So, mas bagay siya dito. So, dito siya dapat. So, dito mo siya ililink. Talking about linking a segment to a code, it's very easy. Here, there's a highlighted segment. Here, you have already the created code. So all you need to do is just drag the created code, release it somewhere here. Okay, so in this blank space, this is where your code memos or codes should appear. Okay, so you can drag that there, release it somewhere here again, release it here, and again, it will show that there's a portion here being coded with this code. It looks like the usual coding that you did, that you normally do in your handouts, except that this time your software will help you organize that. That is good only if you are dealing with a 2-page or 3-page handout. But I'd like to give you an example. We had a project with Ched. It was project of PNU, and I was in the team that did the qualitative data analysis of our data from 33 HEIs, 4 data sets per HEI. That's about 990 data sets, and each data set uh, runs for 1 hour, average of 1 hour interview, which translates to about 21 pages. So that's 90 times 21 pages of data. So imagine how to deal with those volume of data in your analysis. The manual coding will not work because again, when you reach to the third page already, you forget your coding in the first page. So it will not be helpful at all. Okay, so it's important that you have this code system where the codes can be collapsed or codes can be expanded. Okay, so if you are very conscious of the color of the code or the color system, then you can do that. You can put a color coded text, and apparently, it doesn't work in PDF. It works in Word. Okay, maybe it just works, but yeah, there. So if you are very particular with the colors, then you can tell Maxqda to color the coded segments according to the color of the code. All right. So next, you continue reading. Now you encounter another significant indicator. Oh, this talks about this, and this is significant in the purpose of my research. So now you will ask, does this belong to the existing code? If the answer is yes, all you need to do is just drag it and release it there. And you will have that segment coded according to the existing code. Then you read again. There's another segment. This segment, you examine it again. Does it belong to the existing code? Your answer is no. Conceptually, it is not related. Remember, we're looking at conceptual link among the indicators. Remember the framework kanina, yung hierarchy of codes? You say not this is not related conceptually to the existing codes. So the next step to do is to create another code for that. So I am going to create another code. How do you create another code? So you will decide, is the code that I'm about to create conceptually under the existing code, or I need to create a different code outside of the existing code. So this time, if you say that it has to be outside the existing code, then you create a code from here. But if you say that it has to be under this code, you create a code from here so that it will fall under this code. If it falls under this existing code, it becomes a subcode of this major code. Follow? If you create a different code, then it becomes a parent code in itself. So if you say it's a parent code, it's a different, it cannot be aligned to this, it cannot be under this, so I create another code. So create another code, the same process, code it, lagyan ko na lang ng sample ha, sample code na lang para mapabilis tayo. So already 10:58, so maybe I can ask you to spend about 15 to 30 minutes more just to finish this. You can assign a different color for that. Maybe you can have color red and then you create a sample memo. Okay, and then click OK. There is a new code created which has the same level of hierarchy as this one. Do you follow? They're on the same level of hierarchy. Now you will link this code to this. Release that. Okay, so the code that segment is colored according to the color of the code, or the color that we assign to particular code. Now later, you found out that this code that started as a parent code is actually under this code. So what you can do is to change the position of that code. So maybe you can drag that, put it here. It becomes a subcode of an existing code. Later, you realize that it is not a subcode. It must be a parent code. You can go bring it back there. Or later, you realize that there's something else that has to be under that code. Okay, so we can perhaps create a subcode. There's a segment that should be under this particular code. So you create a subcode from here. So it is sample subcode, sample memo, and click OK. And then link that. So the subcode can inherit the color of the mother code, or if you want, you can assign a different color to the subcode. Okay, so later when you realize, oh, this subcode is a subcode of the other one, so you can put it there, you can transfer it there. You can collapse and you can expand. You can hide, you can show. So it means that the codes can be highly organized. And if you arrive at, or if you complete the analysis, you imagine that this will become filled with so many subcodes, so many codes. We call it the code system. The code system will represent hierarchy of codes. You notice the hierarchy of codes we discussed kanina. There's the indicator. These are the indicators in the document browser. So these are all the codes. We have the code level 1, level 2, level 3. We have the category, the basic theme, and then the organizing theme, for example. You can create as many or as detailed as to 100 level of subcodes. So practically, there's an unlimited, there's no limit as to the number of codes and the number of subcodes you can put in the code system. Okay, so this is very helpful if you're analyzing so many data, because you can see here the relationship of the code. So how do you do the advanced level of conceptualization? Kanina, we can look at the coded segments and the relationship of the coded segments. You can put that, cluster that into one code. For example, these two, you cluster the two to form literature-based critical analysis, for example. So that represents the one I have shown in my lecture. Okay, so I'm going to show something that has been completed already. Oh, not necessarily completed, but I have already reported. Right. So, by the way, you can see that it was saved in desktop kanina, so you can see that in the desktop. So the file that I uploaded here, the document that I uploaded, will be saved in this project. Right. I'm going to show something that I have already, more or less you can find already um, the code system, how it will look like later. Okay, this one maybe is, this one is what I worked on kanina. So maybe you can just double click. All right, so this is an existing project. Okay, so again, I have closed the document system. What you can see now are the document browser or the document browser and the code system. If you look at the code system, there's already full of codes there. And if you see an arrow here, it means that you can expand that. Okay, so that's how it may look like in your code system. So you have created this much number of codes, and ang mabigat lang kapag ganitong analysis is yung umpisa. When you are already working on the succeeding units of data, it will become easier because it will be faster to code kasi more or less paulit-ulit na lang kasi. So pag succeeding data, units of data ka na, paulit-ulit na lang yung iba. Kaya mabilis na lang siyang i-code kasi hindi ka nag-create ng panibago. Idadagdag mo na lang doon sa nagawa mo ng code. Okay, so we have already different hierarchy of codes. For example, this one is the lowest in the hierarchy. This one is the second lowest in the hierarchy, and this one is the highest in the hierarchy, for example. Right? So when you process the data, you can start looking at each of these um, codes and see which codes or subcodes are related to. So you can find relationship of the items you listed under here and see if they are really, if there's a duplication of the codes, if there are codes that you can combine. So maybe you can merge that code. That's like what I did. Okay, so you can merge if they are the same. You can, in general or in short, you can manipulate the code system depending on the conceptual emergence or what is emerging conceptually. So if you think that these codes have to be combined, then you combine the codes. In the manual process, you cannot do that right away. It will take so many index cards to do that. The more that you cannot do that manually because of the memo that you need to attach to. For example, this one, I need to create memos, and I have memos written about that. Okay. In your memos, you can also um, create, you can also code the items there by colors or by, uh, you can italicize some items. It's up to you. Okay, so by the way, the context of this is I was writing an article about reflexivity that I needed to read so much. I need to understand in full what reflexivity is. So I had to consult several literature to understand what reflexivity is. For example, this one, I needed to read articles about what reflexivity means so that I can understand it in full. So that when I write the article, I can have a solid background about the reflexivity process. Okay, so retrieval. You can retrieve what you have written as a form of further analysis, especially in reporting your data. You can have the retrieval of the coded segments. So this process now is trying to retrieve all the highlighted data here or highlighted segments here. So if you want to retrieve all those things, you can retrieve that using the retrieve segments window. How do you retrieve? In retrieval, you can be selective. You can select to retrieve from a particular document only, or you can retrieve from all the documents. So when you retrieve from a particular document only, you can just highlight it and then activate that document. Meaning to say, all the retrieval procedures will pertain to that document only. But if you want to retrieve from all the documents, you can retrieve, you can activate all the documents. So click activate all documents, meaning to say you will be retrieving segments from all documents. So this time you can close that. You can also decide to retrieve only documents or segments coded by a specific code. For example, you want only to retrieve segments coded with this particular code, reflexivity in data analysis. So you can activate only this code. Activate, including the subcodes. But if you want to retrieve everything, you can activate all the code or the entire code system. What is the significance of activating specific code system only? Sometimes there's an analysis that will require you to independently analyze every code of the code system. So that will be helpful. But in most cases, you will retrieve everything anyway. Okay, so what you will get after this is the consolidation of the different coded segments. So you can activate the code system, activate all, and all coded segments will appear here. Okay, so how do we export that? How do we read that? You can export that using Excel, but you can export that using Windows also. So from here, you can export retrieve segments. So click export retrieve segments, decide what information will be contained in the retrieved document, and then you click OK. You can export it into a .docx file and click OK. Decide where you want to save it. Save it in your desktop. It's now exporting. And then wait. Anyone who needs to leave before, give me about 10 more minutes. I'll finish this in 10 more minutes. Okay, so look at your desktop. Locate that file. What was the title? Coded segments. Okay, so open coded segments. All right, so this is how it will look like in the coded segments. So the title of the project is Reflexivity, and you have all the coded segments here and the corresponding code. This can serve as one of the audit trails of your qualitative research. You can submit this together with your report and tell the panelists and the reviewers that this is how I coded these specific segments, because it shows the segment and then your code to that segment. It has the documentation because it will show who coded it, when was that coded, and what particular document did it come from. For example, interview in PNU. Okay, so created, modified, something like that. That's your coded segment. Okay, so the other one, which is a more detailed one and a more useful one, is the memo or the memo manager. The memo is where you can find all your ideas in the process of coding. Remember what memoing is? Memoing is justifying or elaborating your codes. Okay, so how do we retrieve the memos? Okay, you go back to your Maxqda, go to the memos or the memo manager. You can search all memos, and you can export all memos. Export all memos in project. And wait. Okay, bakit tayo? Yan, there. Medyo mabigat lang siguro. Save it again in desktop and then retrieve it later. Bigyan natin siya ng time para mag-create ng memo. These are some of memos can contain your personal the memos will really show how reflexive you are because memo will show ano yung mga interaction ng utak mo at ng utak ng key informant mo. Kasi pag nag-analyze ka ng data, maaaring ilalagay mo sa memo mo kung ano yung mga objections mo sa sinasabi niya. Pag sinabi niya na ganito, sabi mo doon, I don't trust this. I don't believe this. I have to learn more about this. You put that in your memo. Or you can put a red mark there, put a question mark. That is actually memoing. That's reflexivity because you're trying to question or trying to object against a certain statement and you want to process that further. Okay, so this one is an example of a memo. So basically, when you write about when you write the report, the memo is already organized according to the code system. So meaning to say, when you write the report, basically you go back to the code system. So for example, this one in our code system, when we write about reflexivity, we write about this key elements or key codes or themes of the code of the reflexivity. So you write about 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. You write about 9 items or key items. So you write about the scholarship status, you write about reflexivity in data analysis, you write about reflexivity, you write about the compelling reasons why we need to do reflexivity, what are the limitations and constraints. When you write about this, you can go to your memos because your memos contain already rich information about those things. It contains the actual coded segment. It contains your thoughts. It contains the interaction of your thoughts and the source of data. So your memo should be as rich as that so that when you try to write the report, all you need to do is just convert this into some paragraphs. Because when you put this as paragraphs, you have already the report. And in fact, your memo will contain the specific document where you retrieve that from. Okay, so if it came from a particular interview data, then it will put there the interview data, the page number, in fact, that we can still find it there. So basically, you are writing the final report when you are doing your memo. So it will be easier later when you write the final report. I have to end because it's already 11:15. I will spend the remaining time entertaining questions regarding the process. I'm going to show again the so that you have some basis of your questions. Anyone?
I think Adrian is opening
Yes.
her
Hello,
audio. Please,
Adrian.
Adrian.
Hi, Adrian.
Hello. Thank you, Professor Jovito Anito, for this rich lecture workshop on qualitative data analysis. At this juncture, we will go ahead and take some time for questions now. So if you have questions to my dear participants, if you allow yourself, just go ahead and unmute your microphone. Anyone?
Ako. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I be recognized, Adrian?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So, grabe, this talk is very rich. I am very much grateful to Professor Jovito Anito for the kindness and generosity of his time and expertise. Wala siyang bayad. Siya pang nag-sponsor
Ay,
ng
wala ba? Wala
Zoom
ba?
link na ito.
Wala ba?
Grabe.
Di
I
ba,
mean,
di ba sinabi mo meron?
when I
Joke lang.
class na narinig niya yun, ha?
Joke
You
lang,
know,
joke
I
lang.
almost would like to clap my hands. Grabe, ito pala yung kailangan, I mean, especially for students like PhD students. Kasi, for example, in making organizing the related literature, na ito yung isa sa mga pinakamahirap na gawin, no?
Yeah.
Kasi hindi tayo makaka-memorize lahat ng nalagay natin from day 1 to day 40, day 60. Ganun, ano? So, ito, parang gusto kong pumalakpak. Ito yung sagot. Now, I have a question, okay? So, kasi we are like planning to share with each other some related literatures. That's one of our aim for this class. So, can we just share codes with each other? Or do we need to have Maxqda lahat para we can share the codes?
I'm sure.
Or
Yeah, I'm showing Maxqda, but apparently you can use Excel. You can start coding using, ano yung tawag yung spreadsheet ba yan? Di ba spreadsheet is online? The Google
yes,
spreadsheet is
Google
online.
Sheets. Google Sheets.
Yeah,
Google Sheets.
whatever you call that.
Oo,
You can work
oo.
on, parang Excel siya na online. Lahat kayo ay
Mm-mm.
collaborators. And then lahat kayo feed doon. So perhaps one of you, or you will decide with the key codes, what do you want to find out in the literature? So ilagay nyo na doon lahat. So lahat ng mga members ng team ay feed na lang ng feed doon ng mga pwedeng ilagay. For example, ilagay nyo yung code as the column header. And then lahat kayo ay maglalagay sa bawat column na kung ano yung bagay doon, anong nilalagay nyo doon. So that's one way of doing it if you don't have the Maxqda. But if you want to play with Maxqda, then there's a free version for 30 days. So you can take advantage of that 30 days to do the task.
Hello?
Nawala. Sinong nawala?
Wala ako.
Yeah.
Feeling ko ako. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So, yung sinasabi mong for doctoral students, magkano yung per month ba yon? Per month or
Parang
one
hindi. Parang
year?
isang package siya ng 24 months ng just around 4,000 pesos. So you can share.
Oh.
All PhD students can share, and then all of you can not necessarily pwedeng kasi isang computer lang yun eh. Pwede kayong bumili ng portable version ng ganun ng pang student, pero yun nga yun mahirap pala kasi hindi na tayo nagkikita. Nasa ganun, parang nasa $97. Pero I don't want you to focus much on the software. Just look at the yung principle behind. Kasi if you know this, even without the software, you can use MS Word, you can use yung Notepad, you can use sticky notes. You can in your desktop pwede siya magiging, kasi if you imagine kapag manual, pwede kasing nasa loob ka ng isang kwarto, tapos lahat naka Manila paper, yung mga codes mo yung mga ganun, tapos nilagyan mo ng lubid yung bawat code to connect with each other, mga ganun. So you can imagine that in your desktop. So ano bang mga software so far na free na pwedeng gumawa nun para mag-connect? It may not be at that that good as this, but at least magagawa na siya. The hierarchy can be highlighted already. But the best thing to do is to suggest to the Segister that to buy this. Di ba, Rose? Umili ka na.
Yeah, we will do it. We will do it. Oh yeah, thank you very much. So that's all my question.
Or if you are interested really to advance into qualitative research, this is a very good investment.
Exactly.
What we did
Especially for
was,
PhD students.
yeah, what we did was, I never purchased this. We always put this in our, every time we have project, we always put this as one of the one of the expenses para meron makaka-accumulate ka ng mga softwares pag may projects. May project ka, di ba? Pasok mo to. May shed ka, di ba?
Yeah, we will try to find it how we can work on it with Celine.
Yeah.
Okay, so Adrian, okay, take it away, and then
Yes.
the host.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you, Ma'am, Dr. Conde and Sir Alito. Ma'am Adaya Presto would want to raise her question. Ma'am Adaya?
Good morning po, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning po, sir. Thank you po for sharing your expertise. Lahat po ng sinabi ninyo tungkol sa qualitative research and even yung program po na shinare ninyo ay very beneficial po talaga sa amin right now as PhD students kasi sobrang ang dami po namin binabasa ngayon. And me personally po, I am thinking of a way how can I um, make readings more efficient po para sa akin kasi kahit na full-time student po ako, nakikita ko po na limited pa rin yung time kapag marami masyadong binabasa. And
True.
for the future po, syempre for our dissertation, magagamit po namin lahat yun. And even in the future pa, na kapag kami po ay magiging research teachers na rin, we can relay yung lahat po ng natutunan namin ngayong araw sa mga magiging estudyante namin. Sir, I am just curious po, dun po sa program na Maxqda, nakita ko po kasi that you can upload an MP3 or MP4
Yeah,
file.
yeah.
Does
But
that mean po ba that,
there's an add-on that will
opo,
how do you call that? Transcribe ba 'yan? Ang tawag niyan?
Opo, does it
Ah,
mean po that if we have an interview in the form of an MP3 or MP4
yeah,
file, it will magta-transcribe po siya sa sarili
that's
niya and
right.
then
Yes, but there's an add-on.
okay po.
Oh, so that's the
Okay
advantage.
po, sir.
Except that it may not be helpful in our context because sometimes our interviewees, especially when we deal with IPs, they don't speak English. Eh. That's why it will be difficult for the software to transcribe.
Okay po.
So magkakagulo-gulo yung kanyang transcription kung ano-ano nilalagay niya na English term equivalent sa parang sounds like doon sa sinasabi. Pero kung straight English yung conversation, that will be very useful.
Okay po, sir. Sir, may isa pa po akong tanong. Kasi po, in one of my subjects at this term po, I will be, yung group ko po, we will be conducting a phenomenological study po.
Wow.
My question po is, kailangan po ba na yung focus group discussion and interview, kailangan po pareho silang gawin in gathering data for a qualitative research?
Yeah, unless there's other way that you can get the lived experiences because the best way to get the lived experiences is to talk to them.
Okay po. Sir, for example, we have 20 participants. Sa focus group discussion po ba namin, is it required that all of them should be present in that session? Or
Hindi
we
naman.
can regroup them po?
Yeah, in fact, 24 is a very big crowd. It's a crowd already for an FGD. Limit your FGD to 5 to 10. Ang maximum na
Okay.
lang 10. 5 to 8 is 10 is already a crowd depending on the quality of the key informants. The reason why we call them key informants because they know a lot. If people know a lot, they speak a lot. And if there are 8 people who speak a lot, it's chaos in a room. So that's what you should remember when you do FGD.
There will be.
But I guess you will be doing it virtually anyway. Di ba? Naka-Zoom na ang mga FGDs ngayon. Wala na face-to-face, di ba? Bawal na kayo face-to-face. Adrian, yes.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for that, Mama Daya. Would there be any other questions from the remaining participants?
Uh,
Yes,
Sir
please.
Adrian,
Sir Steve.
I have a question for Sir Jovito. Sir, what if, for example, kasi minsan sa mathematics, we're obsessed with the cognitive processes of the students and how they answer. So we are after the solution strategies,
Yeah.
and we can only, uh, what do you call this? We can only uh, code strategies by, for example, picturing the work of the student. And then, papaano po siya parang mas lalo pa naming ma-enhance yung power ng pagde-describe ng cognitive processes aside from the solution strategies po ng mga students.
Observation, you can also have that because it's
Okay.
connected. Your behavior. Uh, maybe yung nakikipag-usap sa ano tawag? Ceiling. It's a manifestation of a cognitive function.
Okay po.
You can explore. You can perhaps an interview after the actual problem solving session. I noticed at some point during the problem solving you were doing this. Why were you doing that? Kasi sir, parang nai-imagine ko siya, nakikita ko siya sa kisame. Oh, it's a process that could substantiate your observation in the or their output in the problem solving, something like that. These are all qualitative data. You ask the student to relate. As I've said, any thing that appeals to your senses can be taken as data in the data collection process. So actions, words that could help.
Okay.
Ask for
Sir,
an
pwede rin
interview.
siyang isama po yung halimbawa yung picture ng ginawa nung bata sa audit trail na sinasabi niyo po.
Anong picture?
Yung halimbawa po yung mga solution strategies po nila ganun.
Part siya.
Okay.
So
Okay.
maybe you
Thank you,
can
sir.
look at that. Ito yung naging solution niya. Ito yung ginawa niya para maka-solve ng ganito, something like that. And then
Thank you, sir.
I'm not dismissing the power of quantitative research. Like for example, when you want to see how correct their answers are, the quantitative procedures may be the best thing to use, or maybe the best design to use. We help the designs complement each other.
Thank you po.
I haven't
Sir
heard
Steve.
from Ma'am Romadel and from Ma'am Juvie Buena Agua. Can I get to know them?
And good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. Actually, I am very grateful to be part of this kasi mas nalinawan po ako about sa qualitative research since we are I am teaching research in senior high school, and though hindi ko pa na-practice yung pagturo ng qualitative research, so marami akong questions kasi there are times that some students are asking me about their about qualitative research at wala akong eksaktong idea kung paano ko i-share sa kanila kung ano ba talaga yung qualitative research. Though talagang ang practice ko, sir, more on quantitative research. So ayun, so I am very thankful po and grateful din na ayun nga, sir, napaka po nung kumbaga parang naging malinaw sa akin kung ano ba talaga yung qualitative research. One thing, sir, kasi kanina natanong ko kanina po kasi may nabanggit kayo about sa code and then versus variable. So, yung variable po ba hindi natin puwedeng gamitin sa qualitative what I mean, sir, is code po talaga yung gagamitin nating term kung
Yeah.
qualitative?
Yeah, just to
Okay.
distinguish it from the variable
Yes
of the
po.
quantitative. But in essence, they will become the same. Once you have
Oh,
matured codes, this will become variables when the quantitative researchers will process the qualitative outputs. Actually kasi ang nangyayari, marami sa mga ginagawa ng ginagamit ng quantitative researchers like surveys or instruments, they come from the qualitative research, like the theories. Many of the theories are qualitative in nature. It's just that quantitative researchers quantify them. They create instruments out of those. So just to distinguish the conceptual groups or the conceptual pattern in quali and quanti, we call that code, theme, constructs in quali, while it's called variables in quanti.
thank you very much, sir.
Yes, good morning, sir.
Morning, Ma'am Jove.
Sorry, medyo late po ako na nakapasok kanina. So, ang naabutan ko na lang yung as a analysis part na may class din po ako kasi kanina before. Though early lang po sila natapos. Now, grateful po ako when you shared yung program, yung Maxqda. No, though siguro hindi ko man siya mabibili, no. Pero yung process how it is done, masusundan mo siya. At very very grateful po ako kasi at least when I do my review literature review and then later on sa data, no, masusundan mo siya, magagawa mo ng maayos yung research ko. So maraming salamat po talaga, sir.
Yeah. This is a classic example of my caution kanina. When you deal with participants and there's a kind of a power disadvantage between or in one of the parties, they tend to talk about what's pleasant and what's beautiful. For example, in this case, I was asking for the experience. I was asking for what insights you can give or what experiences. We all talk about what's great about the talk, what's great about the software, right? We rarely limit to talk about what's problematic about this. What cannot fit in my context with this. So that's my caution to all of you. When you do an interview, there's a tendency that your interview will always talk about good things or things that could please you as somebody. So we have to be very careful with that. You may not be able to get the real score if they do that. So yun, make sure you probe. If I have time, I could probe what will not work in your context about what I have just shared, but we don't have time for that. But I hope that you will get in touch with me if there are concerns or issues that you may encounter in the use or in the application of qualitative research in your dissertation or in your research. Okay, so thank you so much. I'll give you back to the organizers.
Okay. Is there anything that you want to ask from Sir Jovito? Okay, thank you, sir, for a very informative talk about qualitative research. We are enlightened on how are we going to interpret or use coding in our qualitative research. Doc Rossi?
Yeah, so we would like to present our certificate of recognition in grateful appreciation for your time and expertise. So I would like to read the certificate of recognition to Professor Jovito Anito. Can we flash the certificate, Adaya?
Mama Daya, magpe-present po ako ng certificate. Ayun.
Si Romadel pala. Si Romadel need it. Not
Okay
Adaya.
na po
Sorry,
ba,
Adaya.
ma'am? Ayan, okay na po, ma'am.
Okay. Can you read the citation, host?
Wow.
Okay po, ma'am. So let me read
Naka-instant.
the citation. Philippine Normal University, the National Center for Teacher Education, College of Graduate Studies and Teacher Education Research, in collaboration with Jose Rizal Memorial State University, and in cooperation with MathEd 813 Selected Topics in the Didactics of Mathematics class, certificate of recognition is awarded to Professor Jovito C. Anito for his highly esteemed contribution of time, effort, and expertise as resource speaker in this PNU JRMSU lecture workshop on qualitative data analysis, presented this 17th day of October 2020 at Philippine Normal University, Manila. Signed, Dr. Heidi Makahilig, Associate Dean, and Dr. Rosie Conde, Faculty in Charge, Math Aid 183.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very much.
much. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. Ito po, another certificate of participation for the participants. So, Philippine Normal University, the National Center for Teacher Education, College of Graduate Studies, and Teacher Education Research in collaboration with Jose Rizal Memorial State University, in cooperation with MathEd 813 Selected Topics in Didactics of Mathematics class. Certificate of participation is awarded to for his or her active participation in the PNU JRMSU lecture workshop on qualitative data analysis, presented this 17th day of October 2020 at Philippine Normal University, Manila. Signed, Dr. Rosie Conde, Faculty in Charge, Math Ed 813, Professor Jovito C. Anito, and Dr. Heidi Makahilig, Associate Dean. Thank you very much for your participation.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Romadel. For the participants, you may view the Zoom chat to answer a evaluation that will